So today we're going to be talking about how to name covalent compounds. And I really like covalent compounds because naming them there's no question about it. You're going to use a formula and it's going to always be the same formula. There's really no exceptions when it comes to covalent compounds. So let's look at the steps. So covalent compounds, they're also called binary molecular compounds, which is just a very fancy way of saying covalent compounds. And you're always going to follow these 3 steps, but you might have to blend steps 2 and 3, and I'll show you what that means. So the first element of the formula is always going to be named using the entire element name. So if you see a C, it's always carbon. If you see an AS, it's always arsenic. The full element names always for that first step. For the second step, you're always going to name the second element root and then ide. So just like you were using an ionic compound, so if it's oxygen and the second one is going to be oxide. If it's fluoride and this second one, it's going to be if it's fluorine, it's going to be fluoride. If it's bromine, it's going to be bromide. And then in front of your name, so in front of either your full element name or your ide name, you're going to use your Greek prefixes to tell me how many there are. The only exception to this is you never put the word mono in front of your first element. So let's talk about how we're going to name the covalent compounds. We're going to walk us through at least one example. So I'm going to start with C. Oh. So the first thing we do is we kind of identify the first and second elements. And remember, this is where capitalization becomes really important because big C, big O is a compound that needs to be named. Big C, little o is a pretty blue stone called cobalt. So our first element for step 1 is, your first element of the formula is always named first. So let's identify it. So that's carbon. It's C. The full name for that is carbon. So that goes right along with step 1. And I'm going to write step 1 first. Okay. The second element of the formula is always named using the root of the element and adding the suffix "ide." So we identify the second element, that is O. So the root of O is ox. That becomes oxide. Now, it says for 3, you have to use prefixes except for mono in front of the carbon. So there's 1 carbon, there's no subscripts, so we just keep the name carbon. Because the rule is prefix for 2 or more. That's pretty much the rule. The prefix is for 2 or more. And then you're going to name the second one, which is oxygen. So we have to always write a prefix for the second element. So there's 1 of them. So it's monoxide. But instead of writing monoxide, we just write monoxide. Because when there is that double O or like a double A, sometimes happens, you just write either O or A, no double vowels, no double same letter vowels. Now this is really a step-by-step if you need it. I'm going to do another example where I show you how to do it like all at the same time. So 1 second. I'm going to show you now a walkthrough on how to do kind of to blend these steps. You don't always have to walk through it 1, 2, 3. If this works for you, please do it. But I'm going to show you how to kind of blend them together. So I'm going to do Okay, so we always name the first one first. It's carbon. Okay, carbon was only one of them, so I never write a mono in front of the first one. So it just is still carbon. Then I name my second element, which is oxygen, which becomes oxide. There's two of them, so it becomes dioxide. And that's how you name, kind of blending them all together, blending steps 1 and 3 and 2 and 3 as you name, so you don't have to break it down unless you really want to. Okay, so now that we kind of understood how to walk through them, I know we've covered these in the past, but I just want to remind you of your covalent bond prefixes. 1 is mono, 2 is di, 3 is tri, 4 is tetra, 5 is penta, 6 is hexa, 7 is hepta, 8 is octa, 9 is nona, 10 is deca. Remember that capitalization for your prefixes is not imperative. And now we're going to do a challenge. I want you to try to name the following compounds: As2O3, SiF4, N2F4, SeO3, and NO. Okay, so let's talk about how we name the following compounds, and you can check it with your own work. So As2O3, the first element is arsenic, and there's a 2 next to it, means there's 2 with that one. So it's diarsenic. And then the next element is O. And so we know it's got an N and I, so it's root and I with the 3. So it's that 3 goes with tri, so it becomes trioxide. Diarsenic trioxide. So the next one is SiF4. So Si is our first element. So you name it using the whole name. So that's silicon. There's one of them. So knowing that there's no mono for the first one, we can just name it silicon. The F4, we know is second element. So the F is fluorine, becomes fluoride. 4 is a tetra, so it becomes tetrafluoride. The next one's N2F4. So our first element is N2, so that's nitrogen, and there's 2 of them, so it's dinitrogen. And then F4 is again tetrafluoride. Then you have SeO3. So Se is our first element. Se is selenium. It has no subscript, so we know there's one of them, and we don't write mono for our first element, so it's just selenium. O3 is our second element. O is oxygen, whose root is ox, so it becomes oxide. With 3 in front, so it becomes trioxide. And finally, the element that says no, that's first element is N, which is nitrogen. You don't have a mono in front of that, so you just write nitrogen. And then for the O, there's only one of them becomes monoxide. And remember, if you were going to be writing mono out, you'd be writing mono, and then you would be doing another OX because of the double O, and then the O, you just take one away and it becomes oxide like that. So let's talk about common names for some of the molecular compounds you're going to see. There's a really famous story about 20 years ago. A shock jock on April Fool's Day woke up and thought he'd prank some people. And he said, "Warning, there is dihydrogen monoxide coming out of your faucet. Did you know that 100% of people who drink dihydrogen monoxide die?" And dihydrogen monoxide's actually water. So of course faucets have water coming out of them. And 100% of people who drink water die because, well, we all drink water and everyone will eventually perish on this earth. But really, he caused a mass panic because just by using the common compound name dihydrogen monoxide, people didn't know that water had a chemical name and caused a lot of worry. One of my students has told me that there is an actual petition on change.org to ban dihydrogen monoxide. And so I think it's really important that students know some of these common names so that you can go back and forth between them and not be fooled by someone using a proper name. So water is dihydrogen monoxide. Ammonia, that's the cleaner for like your floors, is nitrogen trihydride. Hydrazine, that's jet fuel, is dinitrogen tetrahydride. Nitrous oxide, commonly known as laughing gas, is your dentist's best friend, is dinitrogen monoxide. And nitric oxide is nitrogen monoxide, is the common compound name. And remember, when you're doing problems, your chemistry teacher will probably be looking for the common compound name, not the common name, unless specifically asked.